One of the things I did this week is as I try to do each week, is I want to bring a little humor to you. So I went to the internet and I put in earth care jokes. And I knew that I would find hundreds of them. People are taking earth care way too serious because there's not one. Not one. Well, there was one and it was lousy. So I got some other lousy jokes on climate control. I didn't stop there because I knew you'd be disappointed if we didn't have anything. So on climate control, if you live in an igloo, what's the worst thing about global warming? No privacy. This one you'll catch on to. What did the hurricane say to the other hurricane? I have my eyes on you. Joe looked at Dawn and really liked that one. Now here's some ideas on how you know global warming is real. When you learn that a seatbelt makes a pretty good branding iron, you know that global warming is real. Pardon? I'm getting all kinds of comments from the gallery over here. But anyway, when you discover your bird feeder is clogged with puff wheat and popcorn, you know there's global warming. When hot water comes out of both tabs, you know there is global warming. When you realize that asphalt has a liquid state, you know there's global warming. And here's the one that I really like. When the chickens are laying hard-boiled eggs, you know that we are having global warming. Okay? Thank you. So, yesterday was Earth Care Day. And as you know from our little skit this morning and from the bag lady and all those kinds of things, that we are looking at Earth Care, and I hope and want to do this morning is look at it from a spiritual perspective, not just as Earth Care, which is important too, but from an overall perspective of how we're connected one to one. I was watching the Earth Care ceremony in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, and the preacher of the papal family or household, and I didn't know if they had that, but that's what it's called, gave a quote that I found interesting. He said, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him." Well, this comes from Genesis. "Male and female, he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.'" The word dominion, if you look back on the history of it, means also to be responsible for. Does not mean to control, does not mean to waste, does not mean to ignore, to be responsible for. Therefore, the message this morning. Now I'll get back to what the minister said at St. Peter's. This is a quote. "Why do you see yourselves so worthless in your own eye when you are so precious to God? Why tender yourself such dishonor when you are honored by God? Why do you ask, why are you created, and not want to know how to be an expression of God?" Interesting enough, this was a quote that came from the 5th century of the church. St. Peter Chrysologus, who was the Pope during the 5th century. I thought about that, and I found how true that is, and that is what we would call a new thought today, many of us, as we read. That's what it sounds like. That's what we teach. And so we are very much in agreement with St. Peter and with his minister. And then I thought about, how do we show up as an expression of God? And I remembered Maslow's theory, an idea of the different steps, pretty much from survival all the way to self-actualization of each and every one of us. And what I understand is that when we move into self-actualization, we have learned to honor ourselves and love ourselves. We have learned to honor ourselves and love ourselves. We start to understand that we are no longer worthless, that we are special, and yet we're humble about that because we are created in the image and likeness of our Creator. We inherit the image and likeness of God. And we inherit the natural being in the state of God, if you would, in the energy of God, and the light of God. And when we come there, we then start to actualize in all of our relationships the love of God. And we're able to do that. We then have relationships that are understanding, that are compassion and wisdom. Many times when we use the word relationship, we think of other people. And yet we are in relationship to everything, not just everybody. St. Thomas of Aquinas defined relationship in the light of substance relationships. He said we do not have relationships, we are relationships. Wow. We are relationships. We are connected, we are not separated. And you know, that's true of nature. Whether it's a plant, an animal, a fish, the water, the heavens, I don't care what it is. We are in relationship to all that. And that says to me that we have some responsibilities. Now, there's a concept they talk about known as humanistic environmentalism. And it's open to everybody. You know, one of the nice thoughts about that is you can say that and you don't have to be religious. You don't have to follow a particular doctrine of faith. That it encompasses everybody. And that's the idea behind it, because the people who came up with this were basically atheists. And that's okay. And it says we are in relationship with the environment because our environment and the controlling of our environment has an effect on the poor, the hungry, and those who are disadvantaged. That one of the reasons I want clean water, clean air, clean energy, and healthy food is because those conditions support a higher standard of living, if you would. And we spiritually awaken then to knowing that we are children of God and supporting the planet overall. We are in different steps and different phases of progression as human beings, as a society, called the human condition. And the first step really was that time in history where we were, if you would, in a survival mode. In spiraling dynamics, it is represented by the purple, and it's called the magic time, when things magically happen because nobody could explain them. We had not gotten to the point of reflective thinking where we could think. We hadn't gotten to the point of science where we could understand those things and explain those things. And it was considered to be magic, but it really was a time of survival. The time, if you would, of tribal age is what it's called. Then we moved to a second stage, which is a great traditional, civilizations. Traditional civilizations. And those developed over thousands of years. Last night I was watching a piece on the pyramids. And I was amazed as they shared with us not only the history of the pyramids, but how they were built and how they were in alignment, if you would, with the environment, so that inside the pyramids there were electrical charges that would go on and continue to this day. Created that way. So they took the environment into consideration as they built these pyramids. And then the third, and most of us are very aware of this, which has been more recent, is the technological age. You know, starting with a steam engine and ending up with an Apple computer. We've moved through that process, and we're continuing to grow in that area. But today, what some believe is that we are now moving into the ecological stage, and that it's necessary, that it's important that we do so. Because we now have, and this is Friar Berry speaking, we now have the power of life and death not only over our human life, but over the earth itself and its higher forms of life. He says that makes it necessary to move to an age wherein nations must learn a primary allegiance to this larger life system. Planetary welfare is now the welfare of each nation and each individual. Most of us don't have much effect, except through our vote, on what our national leaders do. But we do have a responsibility, I think, to Mother Earth and to the idea of eco-spirituality. What we start to understand is that when we know that we're human, or we know we're spiritual beings in this human condition, we really start to understand the responsibility we have. You see, we're not just expressions of God. We are the activity of God happening in this world. And so spirituality, eco-spirituality, says basically there's a tie between the spiritual, not the religious, but the spiritual, and our environment. And many times it signifies a need for environmental activism. We do that in this church. Our green team has done a great job of making us aware of the need to recycle. We've been doing that for a number of years. And when the green team decided it wasn't their job to do any longer, what we did is the staff and myself have continued to do it. So we still have our recyclable bins, and then once a week one of us gets it together, and I either take it home or they take it home, and we put it in recycling. So that's something we're doing. Does it make a great, great impression on the world overall? No. But it makes an impression here locally, and that's what's important. And so, as we look at this idea, we start to think that we need to think globally but act locally. And it urges each and every one of us to think about the health of the planet. Now, about 4 years ago, I gave a message on Hot Topics, and I cited some statistics about the warming of the earth. And before I got home, I got an email. Your statistics are not correct. There are other statistics that show it's not happening that way. And so I looked up those statistics, and sure enough, the statistics said it's not happening that way. Then I went online and looked for more statistics so I could find other viewpoints. And I found some more that said it's not happening that way. And before long, what I realized, the statistic didn't make any difference. I just had to use my common sense. My common sense says that the earth is consistently changing. Now, you and I can help it change quicker, or we can help it change not as quick. But it is changing, and we're not going to stop that. We didn't stop the ice age. We didn't stop the age when water was all over the earth. We didn't stop the age when there was barrenness. We didn't stop the age when there was tropical. And this climate will change over time. And I need you to be aware of it. Now, we can either look at it from a pessimistic standpoint. We're all doomed. Our children are doomed. Our grandchildren are doomed. That's not where I go. Or we can believe in the ingenuity of the creative process that's born within us as spiritual beings. And that's that as the climate changes, we will create ways in which to live in that climate. To manage our lives and to manage the universe in such a way, or the world in such a way that we can continue to survive. Because we are important as expressions of God. We are that vehicle as an expression of God. And so if we look at it that way, we don't have to get wrapped up in is it or is it not? Or the earth warming. You know, I just saw an article on CNN, which I don't always trust, I admit that. Okay, I don't trust much news today. Now I sound like Donald Trump for a second, but I apologize. But anyway, I mean, because it's mostly opinions is what I see, but let's not go there. But I did already. But anyway, what I want to just share is this idea that the Louisiana fishermen came together and they agreed that the water was rising, that the land was starting to disappear, and that there was no global warming. And that's okay. What they're recognizing is the change. You see? Who cares why it happens? Except from the standpoint of what we can do to be good environmentalists. And I would say to be good children, to be expressions of God. That our ecosystem, our relationship with nature, our relationship with one another, are all combined together so that we can be at peace. We can experience joy. But we do it because we know within us are the answers to whatever is coming and to future generations. We are created with those divine ideas. And we think divinely when we express divinely, when we use what I call common sense, and that means that it's whatever I think, and you agree with that. That's common sense, okay? But when we use our common sense, it just seems to me, and our spiritual sense, that we understand that we're not at a loss, but that we can do things that make sense to make the better world. We do it locally. We get rid of the plastic if we can, as much as possible. It makes sense. We take care of the forest. I mean, the wonderful natural parks in this world and throughout the world. They're necessary to take care of the economy. So we don't turn our backs on Mother Nature, on Mother Earth. Instead, we embrace Mother Earth because we are in relationship with Mother Earth. We are in relationship with Mother Earth. And in knowing that, we know that we can be instruments for not the survival of Mother Earth, because that Mother Earth is going to take care of itself, but instruments for benefiting from the good that Mother Earth offers to us. Thank you.